All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 11th presentation of Avalanche Canada's 2021-22 webinar series. My name is Alex Cooper, and I'm your producer for the evening. Nancy Geismar is also online, and she will be the moderator and looking out for your questions in the Q&A box. James Floyer, our forecast program supervisor, is also here to help answer questions. We hope you're all having a great season recreating in the backcountry this winter. Avalanche Canada's mission is to help educate backcountry users so you can play safe in the mountains throughout the winter. We want you to know more, go further, and come home. First, we would like to acknowledge that our session is being hosted in Revelstoke, British Columbia, on the territory of 4 First Nations, the Sinixt, Secwepemc, Ktunaxa, and Silks. We also want to acknowledge the Mi'kmaq Nation in Newfoundland, where our field team lives and works. And then as a national organization, we also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations on whose land we live and recreate on all across Canada. We would like to thank our sponsors. We are very thankful to them for being loyal in their financial support for us during these challenging economic times and working with us to reach new backcountry users this winter. We've got, as you saw, we've got our government partners, our program partners, our premier sponsors and supporting sponsors, and contributors. We really appreciate you being here tonight and your interest in avalanche safety. If you like what you hear in our programs, you can support them by donating as little as $10 to Avalanche Canada. There will be a link put in the chat box if you'd like to donate. And we also hope you folks stick around for the full presentation, as we will be giving away some draw prizes at the end. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is muted automatically to start. There will be opportunities to ask questions throughout the webinar. To do so, click on the raise hand icon in the bottom of your Zoom screen. Our producer will unmute you so you can ask a question. Another way to ask a question is in the Q&A box, which is also found at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A box for questions as opposed to the chat box. Well, tonight's presentation is a very exciting one. It is Avalanche Forecast in Newfoundland. And well, I have to say, for everybody here at Avalanche Canada, we are really excited to be publishing the first ever Avalanche Forecast for Newfoundland and Labrador starting tomorrow. This is a pilot project, and it'll see Avalanche forecasts written for Saturdays and Sundays over the next 6 weeks. So starting February 18th and going on until March 26th. These forecasts will cover the long-range mountains in Western Newfoundland, including Grossmore National Park. And they'll give backcountry users an extremely valuable tool for planning their backcountry trips for the rest of the winter. We have our Newfoundland field team presenting tonight. Andy Nichols and Peter Thurlow, both based in Rocky Harbor. They go out and collect snowpack weather and avalanche information and work closely with our forecasting team in Revelstoke, British Columbia to develop the weekend forecasts. They also share a lot of their observations on social media and the Mountain Information Network. Andy is our Newfoundland field team leader and an avalanche skills training instructor and a forever avalanche student. In his spare time, it's either stuck on a sled, split boarding, ski joring, and wondering when pizza night is going to be. Peter lives in Western Newfoundland with his wife and daughter. They call Grossmore National Park their home. When it's not winter and when Peter's not poking around in the snow, he's focused on the ocean and Newfoundland's world-class kayaking. He's always more than happy to talk about conditions, so don't hesitate if you see him in the backcountry. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Andy and Peter now.
Hey, thanks, Alex. So yeah, big news. We got our first ever avalanche forecast coming to Newfoundland. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys here. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Big news. We're super excited about this new pilot project. We're going to start the night off with a couple of polls. Alex, you got some couple of polls to bring up for us?
Yeah, definitely. I think for our first poll, we just want to know what kind of sports people do, what user group we're looking at here. So I will just launch the poll here. We'll give people about 30 seconds or so to answer, just so we kind of know what who we're talking to. All right, seeing lots of skiers, few motorized, snowmobile and snow bikers, and some snowshoers. It looks like everybody, still a few more responses coming in, but all right, let's see what we got here.
Wow, yeah, looks pretty pretty high in the ski snowboard. We're definitely seeing a lot more people in the backcountry split boarding and skiing these days. Snow bikes and snowmobiles, and then snowshoers. So yeah, nice well-rounded group. It's great.
Great. All right, let's move on. Next one, we want to find out how much training people have. So let's see. Oh, sorry. Click the wrong button.
Hold tight, everybody. We keep trying to get somebody in for an AST2, and hopefully with the COVID restriction easing up, hopefully soon enough we'll have somebody in for some. There's lots of thirst here for an AST2 course. It's really good to see.
Yeah. All right, let's share the results here.
Yeah, so we've got a few people who've not done much, which is great. We're going to show you lots of tools and lots of places to get started today. Some people with a bit of seminar and workshops, some AST1s, and no AST2s, but we do have some people in the group with some CAA level training. So that's great to see too.
Yeah, great. All right, and the last question we've got is we want to know how familiar people are with an avalanche forecast. We don't know how many of you might have used them out west or seen them some point somewhere, but let's check it out. All right. All right, I'll close it up. Let's share the results here.
Okay, yeah, a few have used it a lot. I guess lots of people who've, more and more people coming back to Newfoundland who've been out west and on trips or have done a season or two out there. Some people who've never seen it. And yeah, so a nice mix of everything, but hopefully tonight we'll get you nice and acquainted.
All right, well, that's all we got for our poll. So Andy, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so it's really exciting news, and we're talking about forecasts. And I guess, some people may be wondering, what an avalanche forecast is. And an avalanche forecast is basically a snapshot of what the avalanche conditions are expected to be in a certain area for a certain period of time. So as Alex said, we'll be doing that a couple times a week, Saturdays or Fridays and Saturdays, and each time for a 3-day outlook. And you can see the region that we are forecasting for is right here on the map. The Long Range Mountains is the title of it, and it goes up the coast and down as far as Stephenville. So that's the area that the forecast will be good for. And it's really exciting that we have Avalanche Forecast here. There's lots of people who've taken AST courses in the past few years, and a lot of that course is revolved around the forecast. So it's nice to have that final piece of the puzzle to add into our safety planning and stuff. And but it's good to remember that the Avalanche Forecast is actually still only a part of the puzzle. And so tonight we're going to show you, a bunch of other, talk about the forecast, but also talk about a bunch of other tools and knowledge and skills, things that we use in conjunction to plan a safe day in the backcountry. So I'm going to start the webinar off with just kind of talking about how the forecast works, showing these other tools that we can use in conjunction with it, and basically, you know, how to navigate through the website and use these things as it may be new to some people. So, so you can get all this stuff on avalanche.ca is the Avalanche Canada website. But if you type in avalanche.ca/NL, it'll actually bring you to this part of the map hovering over Newfoundland. If you don't, you end up hovering over Alberta and British Columbia. But and if that happens, it's okay too. Just swipe over to the right and find Newfoundland on the map. And of course, you can also get this on your phone as well. So you can get the Avalanche Canada app, and you highly recommend doing that because it's super versatile to use in the car and on the way to the field and all those kinds of things. So lots of really good tools through the app as well. So I'm going to start off here. And before I get into the forecast itself and some of the tools we use, I'd like to show you some of the learning resources that are available. So if you were to click on the Learn tab up here in the corner, you know, there's a lot of stuff on here that you can get into. If you're new to the backcountry, there's a nice start here section that's, you know, really beginner and gives you a nice introduction. There's some stuff about the essential gear and the training layout. So there's some really cool things there. And then if you come down and look at the Avi Savvy, this is our online Avalanche tutorial. It's super in-depth, tons of really, really cool learning resources in there. You can go to the rescue at Cherry Bowl. This is a story about an avalanche rescue that happened in BC. A lot of really good things come out of that case study. So that's worth checking out. All of these webinars are recorded and they're all available here on the site as well. So you go on there, and if there's any topic, sorry, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight are avalanche problems. And Simon Horton, one of our Avalanche forecasters, just did a great presentation on that. So, you know, a bunch of topics in there you can sit down and watch a webinar on. There's also a bunch of videos. So, you know, a ton of information here to kind of add to your learning and get you started on the process. And the one I skipped over there that I really want to show you, maybe the less exciting of them all, but I find, you know, super useful, is the glossary. I just got that open in another tab here to show you. So when you go into the glossary, it's alphabetical, and there's a bunch of you know, definitions of all the things. So if you're looking at something on the forecast, you don't know what it is, you know, look it up in here. And there's lots of rabbit holes here of, you know, you click on one thing and then there's links to videos and all sorts of stuff. And you know, you can really learn a bunch of stuff through this glossary as well. And so one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit tonight is the avalanche danger scale, which is something that our forecast is revolved around. And so here it is. I typed it in, it comes up, the avalanche danger scale. And so you can come in here, have a look at this, gives lots of definitions, and you can come down through and look at all the different stuff about each level of the danger scale. And, you know, Cole's notes on that, we've got from low up to extreme. And when avalanche danger is at low, it's generally safe conditions, unless you're in really steep progressive terrain where you still need to keep your eyes peeled. You know, it's generally safe. But then as you get up into the high and extreme at the other end of the scale, things can be, you know, travel in avalanche terrain is really not even recommended. So pretty easy decisions at that end as well. And where it gets really tricky is in the middle with considerable and moderate. And this is where, you know, we really want to have use some of the tools we're going to show you here tonight, and some skills and knowledge and route finding and all those things come together to be really important to give yourself a safe plan for the backcountry. So when you look at the danger scale here, it shows you the different levels. There's travel advice and the likelihood and size of avalanches that coincide with each one. So a lot of information there, but, you know, I invite you to go in there and dive into that every time you see the forecast, and as the levels change, which they will, go in and read up about the one that's in the forecast that day. And the other thing we're going to talk about a lot, and you'll see often in the Avalanche forecast, are the avalanche problems. So I'm just going to type that in. Avalanche problems. And here we are. So we'll talk about this a lot, and it'll be present in the avalanche forecast all the time. It'll show the elevation bands in which the problems are in. For the Newfoundland forecast, we're only going to have alpine and tree line that we're forecasting for. We don't really have a lot of avalanche terrain or problems below tree line in our thick Newfoundland forest. So, and a lot of the terrain there is flatter. It also shows you the problems. Often talk about, which slopes are dangerous, which aspects of the mountain, the chances and size of avalanches that are expected. So there's a list over here of all the different avalanche problems. And here you can click on each of these and go into its own section where there's an explanation and a really good video that really explains each avalanche problem really well. We're going to see storm slabs and wind slabs a lot in Newfoundland. In our forecast that we'll look at today, there's going to be storm slabs, I expect, because we're getting, a big storm. This is when we get a bunch of snow in a short period of time. And, these problems usually go away after a day or so, and as the snow settles. Wind slabs, when snow has been transported by the wind and tucked into lee features, and those can be a little harder. They can stick around a little longer. And we can also get persistent slabs, deep persistent slabs, things that are a little more under the snow that are trickier to see. And anyhow, I won't get into too much detail on those, but again, this is a great resource to come in here and look these up as you see them showing up in the forecast. You can jump over here and dive into what they're all about. So I'll go back then to our Learn tab. I'm just going to hit the main page again. So here we are again, just looking over our map of Newfoundland, our forecast in here, which is not up and running yet. It will be tomorrow. And here's our region. So you've probably heard us talking lots on social media, and or if you in the interviews, whenever we get a chance, we're plugging lots about the Mountain Information Network, which is our, what we call the MIN for short, MIN reports. And what these are is basically a crowdsourcing tool in which any of the public can go in here, create a report, and let people know what conditions they saw in the backcountry that day. So it's really useful as other people then can look at these reports, get information to, plan a better trip, a safer trip if avalanche conditions are high, or to know where the good snow is, or know the places that aren't worth going because everything's icy. So there's lots of uses for it, and the more people that use it, the better off we'll be. It's also a really important tool for avalanche forecasting, because in Newfoundland, we're a very data sparse area. We don't have a lot of information coming in from different avalanche professionals as we do in BC. So, we will be looking at this a lot to try and gain data to come up with the forecast. So let's just have a look at that. So when you look at your map here over Newfoundland, and you see these little blue drops, these are the Mountain Information Network things. You got to keep on going in. There's two there, so I click on that, and that shows me two. I'm going to click on this one just to show you what it looks like. So this one is put in by the Spicy Caesar crew, and they were in the Blow Me Downs and Frisbee Bowl. And they talked about the riding was terrible. This was last week. Crusty, wind affected, hard, sunny. They showed some real great stuff that they dug a pit and they talk about the findings they had in their compression test. They found a bit of a weak layer in here. And then they talked about, they made some real great choices and stayed away from steep terrain that day because of what they found, and still had a nice day out of it. So they put in a picture about it. Picture is worth 1,000 words. So this is really great info for everybody and our forecasters to see what's going on in the snowpack and where these results were that they got in their tests. So, you know, really good job. Thanks to those guys for putting that one in there. One note is that you can click here and go to Mountain Information Network and open up this little tab, and you can change how many things are showing, 14 days to 30 days, down to 7, down to 3, depending on how much information you want to see. So maybe information from 2 weeks ago is not that useful if you've been in the backcountry a lot, but if you just came in from St. John's and you haven't been around and you're wondering what's been happening over the past few weeks, then you can open it up to 14 days, let's say, and get a big picture of what's been happening. So a great tool to change the amount of min reports you see on the map. So if you want to get involved and do that, you just go to resources, and you can do these on your phone, of course, which is fantastic because you can take the pictures and do it on the way home. And when you go up to Mountain Information Network, there's a Min 101 here. So this is a really good place to start if you want to get a little tutorial on how to do it and some tips on making min reports. You can click on a list of reports instead of looking at the map. And when you want to make one, you go in here and just click create a report. And this all works the same on the phone as well once it comes up. And so it gives you a chance to name your report. But you can say when you're in the backcountry. It's super important to know. You can pick a location on the map. Pictures are super important, so as many as you got, throw them all in there, have some fun, show us how good it was. Love to see pictures of people just slaying some pow kind of thing. It's lots of information. So if the wind was blowing, a lot of pictures are great. You can drag and drop those in there. Come to the other side, you can do a quick report, which is what a lot of people do, and it's great just to do that. You can do more. I'll show you in a moment. But so you can pick snow conditions. The ice conditions here, this is for ice climbing, so not ice conditions on the ponds in Newfoundland. We might argue, maybe we want that too. So we look at what the conditions were like. Was the riding amazing, okay, terrible? Snow conditions, were they crusty, powder, heavy? You can pick more than one of these things. You want to paint a picture for variable conditions. Talking about the kind of slopes that you rode, the ones you stayed away from, what the weather was like, and avalanche conditions of anything you've seen, snow, avalanches themselves, woofing, temperature rises, all those kinds of things. So, and then at the bottom, there's a comment box, so you can, put a bit of flair in there or sort of comment on anything in particular you want to stand out or get across to people. So, a great way, super easy. All just kind of drag and drop, pick your stuff and post your report. So you can also go in then, of course, to the Avalanche tab and talk about avalanches if you've seen them. You can talk about snowpack if you've seen that. Or you dug a pit, sorry, you can talk about snowpack. You can talk about the weather. There's a bunch of same thing, a whole tab for each one, and incidents as well. So if you had like a near miss and set off an avalanche, we'd love to know. We'd love to see some pictures of it. So you can go in there and talk about, what you were doing and a little bit about what happened. So a ton of information possible to put in there. Short and sweet is amazing. Doing 2 or 3 of these if you like, that's great too. And it depends on the day. Some days we fill out lots of stuff. Some days we just keep it simple. So we'd love to see whatever you can to put into the min reports. So hopefully we see lots of people doing those. I'm going to we're going to start our min to win thing here today. So we're going to give a prize to the Spicy Caesar crew. We know who those guys are, so get in contact if you're out there. We're going to hunt you down. We got some buffs for you guys. And so every week now we're going to try and give away a prize, for people who are doing mins. We might give away 2 or 3. We'll see. Anytime we see something really cool, maybe we'll give somebody a hat if they do a really good one. So keep your eyes peeled. Send us lots of mins. We really want to know what you're doing out there. So I'm just going to back up a little bit here. And now I want to show you what the avalanche terrain exposure scale is. So maybe you've seen some of the signs around in the blow me downs. There's some signs for the Lewis Hills and the some stuff for the North Arm Hills, if you've seen those. But basically, a couple of years ago, we had the avalanche terrain exposure scale applied to the mountains in Western Newfoundland, from the Lewis Hills all the way up to the northern part of Grossmoor National Park. And what this is a terrain rating. It tells us the different types of terrain that you're interacting with. So the way you get into that, you also go under the Resources tab, and then you go down under Planning and go to Trip Planner. You open Trip Planner, the screen's going to change a bit, and it's going to give you the definitions over on the left-hand side first. And if you want to get rid of these, you can. It talks about your simple, challenging, and complex terrain. It's a green, blue, and black. And then when we look at the map, you click, of course, it brings up the forecast. We don't want that yet. That's not live, but so we look in here, and I'm just going to zoom in somewhere here to the, where do you guys want to go? Want to go blow me downs? Okay. So we zoom in closer to the blow me downs, and you can see here that the simple terrain is kind of the flat terrain that we see on top of the blow me downs and skirting the edges. So, fairly safe terrain, but still avalanche terrain. There's small slopes that you need to look out for, micro terrain that could cause a problem, but generally safe travel. And then you get into the blue terrain, which is challenging. And in here, you're starting to, interact with avalanche paths, but there's still lots of ways to make better routes and avoid the problems. You get into more to the complex terrain, the black, and now we're talking about, the big, steep, committing terrain in which, once you've entered it, there's not a lot of ways to avoid the problem altogether. Of course, good route finding and decision making can help, but you've committed yourself to bigger terrain, and you really want to be thinking about the avalanche hazard and some of the slope evaluation tools that we're going to talk about later when you're getting into complex terrain. So that's how you can look at those, and I'll scroll out here, and again, so you can see all the little blobs. So these are the terrain that's done. So the Lewis Hills, Blow Me Downs, the North Arm Hills, the Tablelands, and then the north section of the park. So lots of great info there to use when you're planning a trip. So I'm going to change tabs here, and we've got a little treat here. We did James, our forecasting supervisor, did up a forecast today for tomorrow, just so we could use it in the program tonight. So this is not on the main website, but one of our development sites, and we've got the long range forecast here. So we can click on that, and now we're into our avalanche forecast. And long range mountains, February, valid till Sunday, Thursday to Sunday. So at the top of the forecast, there's always going to be a little bit of a blurb about what's going on. So a major storm, 100 millimeters of precip by Friday, lots of rain. There's going to be lots, expect an avalanche cycle. And, we want to avoid avalanche terrain immediately and during, after the storm. And, no doubt with a bunch of new snow that may have came in last night and all this rain, it's going to get pretty dangerous. I guess we're probably not going to be out there tomorrow with all the rain. If somebody's going out, let me know. I'd like to talk to your wax guy, because I'd like to be able to ski we need to start figuring out how to ski in the rain. So if we look at the forecast, the first part we look at, kind of the broad stroke here, is the danger ratings. And so it's going to tell us Friday, it's high in the alpine and tree line. Saturday, it starts coming down to considerable. Things start to settle out, and then down to moderate and low for Sunday. At the bottom here, it's always going to give you a bit of terrain and travel advice. So it says avoid avalanche terrain during periods of heavy loading from either new snow, wind, or rain. So great starting point. We can kind of think about that and where we want to go. If we want to dive a little deeper though, we click on the Avalanche Problems. And so we talked about these a little bit earlier. And the first one here now is a storm slab. This may shift over the next couple of days when we actually get our, new forecast by Saturday. We, maybe more of a wind slab that's present if we get some new snow after the rain. So again, you see your problem, tells you what aspects it exists on, or sorry, what elevations, what aspects, the chances of it happening, and the size. And then a little blurb again, heavy rain will most certainly cause avalanches in some of these areas. So then you want to dive one more time deeper. You go into the details section, and then you can look at the Avalanche Summary. There was a human-triggered avalanche reported in the north part of the region on February the 10th, so that's good to know. We're going to get, widespread avalanche cycle Thursday, Friday, and depending on how much snow comes after the storm, we'll change what the avalanche hazard is going to be then. So, in some of our areas to the north, we may get, half decent snowfall by the end of this. So it could be pretty dicey for the first day once that comes down. So yeah, a bunch of information about here, about what may happen and what's been going on, snowpack summary, weather summary. So, a ton of information about what's happening with the avalanche hazard. Down here at the bottom, you'll see it says confidence, and right now it says high. And what this means, this is how confident the forecasters are in, what they're telling us. And of course, right now, the confidence is very high because we know we're getting this big storm and a ton of precip, and it's going to get really warm. And without a doubt, avalanche hazard is going to be high when all that is happening. And maybe by the forecast on Saturday, the confidence may go down because maybe we have a bit of storm, a storm coming Monday or something like that, but we really don't know how much snow exactly it's going to be. So we're not, we might put it at high or whatever it is, but that could change a bit. So confidence is just letting you know how certain we are of what's going to happen. So again, it's a lot of information, and if you're new to it, look at the forecast, and anything you don't know and that you're interested in, use some of the tools in the Learn tab here to go look them up and kind of treat it like a little learning tool every time you look at a forecast. So if we go back to the idea of our trip planner, and I'm going to go back into resources here. This is the final tool we can use. And I go trip planner, close that up, and now we see our terrain rating again over here. We'll go back to the blow me downs. And here we are. And so once the forecast is live, so on the main page this doesn't work yet, but where we have a forecast up and running on this page right now, our trip planner is actually going to work. So if I go over here in the blow me downs and click in the green terrain, the simple terrain, the online trip planner comes up. And so what it does, it gives me the forecast over here. I can look back through that. And then what it does basically is marry the forecast to the avalanche terrain exposure scale. So we've picked simple terrain in high avalanche danger. So we're still in extra caution just because the danger is really high. But if I were to go over, let's do that again and click in the complex terrain, well, now we're over in not recommended because we've, it's high avalanche danger. We've picked complex terrain. So this tool is, it's just going simple, challenging, complex. in reference to the forecast danger levels. So again, it's a little bit broad stroke, and Peter's going to show you a tool that is more slope specific that you can use when you're actually in the field. Looks a lot like this, but a little more of a field tool. So we'll close that down, and yeah, so that's just a brief summary on how to navigate through the avalanche forecast, how to use some of these tools, and some of the places you can learn how to learn a bit more, have some more avalanche education, and be able to make a safe trip. So that's I'll hand it off now back to Alex and Peter to go on. I don't know if Alex, if there's any questions or anything at this time about any of that stuff on the website.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A box, but if anybody's got one, you can either raise your hand or just type it in there, and we and Andy can have a chance to answer it. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Well, thanks so much, Andy, for that presentation, just showing people around the site. There's a lot of good tools, lots of, I think a lot of people can enjoy poking around there and learning about avalanches on our website. But I guess we'll go over to Peter, who's going to
Thanks a lot.
Talk about the daily process.
Okay, guys, one sec. I share my screen here. Looks like, Andy, you're going to have to get off. Okay, that looks like it. Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thanks, guys. And thanks to those of you who signed in. I feel really lucky to have grown up here in Newfoundland, and I'm pretty stoked to be part of this year's Avalanche Forecast pilot project. It represents a huge leap forward in avalanche awareness for us here in Newfoundland, and I hope it proves to be a valuable tool for our future backcountry endeavors. This evening, I'll be talking to you about something we like to think about as the daily process for a day in the backcountry. You know, all professionals and experienced recreationalists have a daily process. It becomes ingrained, and it's these good habits that will form the backbone to your safer backcountry experiences. You can learn more about the daily process in an AST course, but tonight we will give you an idea of how it works. So yeah, the daily process. It looks a lot like this slide, 7 steps. Avalanche Canada have devised 7 steps and dubbed it the daily process. The idea here is whether you're a seasoned pro or new to the backcountry, these key concepts and practices should be incorporated in your days out as a responsible backcountry user in avalanche terrain. What I'd like to do here is go step by step through this process, talk about each element, how it might flow into my day, and how you can use it to help guide some of your decisions throughout the day. So let's begin on step 1. Get the avalanche forecast. www.avalanche.ca will bring you to the map, and /NL will bring you right to Newfoundland. Once you're there, you can click on our region. So I'm sort of clicking through a series of slides here, guys, so I won't be driving through the internet, but yeah, you'll get the idea. So yeah, I've clicked on our region for today, and as Andy's pointed out with his forecast, we're looking at high. So that's our first bit of information, and you know, sort of the start of the day. This is when I'm got my coffee brewed in my hand. It's dark out, and yeah, I'm flipping the laptop open for the start of the day. So from here, I'm going to go to problems. It's the next tab you guys can see right here. And it looks like we might have some storm slab coming up in the forecast. So the big thing with the problems is that it also presents 4 vital questions. What elevation, which slopes, chances of avalanches, and expected size. Now, these 4 questions and the problems associated with them can summarize how pros evaluate and select appropriate terrain for the day. And this sort of section of the forecast is what I consider sort of the meat and potatoes of it. If I want to go a little deeper, I can click one more tab over on the details. And as Andy's described, this is where our forecaster sort of qualifies and summarizes what we've been talking about on the other two tabs. So Avalanche Summary, Avalanche Snowpack, or Snowpack Summary, Weather Summary, and the Confidence. So this is the Avalanche Forecast. I've gotten it, and I'm armed with a bit of information to get on to step 2 here. Plan your trip. So at this point, I'm usually diving into a host of other online resources, weather forecasts, models, windy, maybe FatMap or Gaia if I've got a particular piece of terrain in my mind. There's lots of factors to think about. But the one thing I find helpful is to be flexible in your planning. This plan does not have to be written in stone by any means. So yeah, you want to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. It also helps to recognize that plans can be dynamic. The pros are constantly assessing their plan and looking for other options should conditions change or be different than expected. Now, the goal here in this step is to maximize the enjoyment of your day for the entire group while efficiently and effectively managing risk. A couple other considerations in the plan your trip step can be things like plan your group. Having a group that can work together is just as important as having the information about the snow conditions. Expectations. We want the expectations in our group to be aligned, and good pre-trip communication is the key to this step in a lot of these. Group size. Once we get into bigger groups, 5, 6 people or more, good communication and decision-making becomes much more difficult. So maybe if you're planning a big group, say 10 people, sometimes it's often the best to split into separate groups and go from there. So one tool that Andy touched on and dove into was that fits really well into this stage is the min reports. And the question is, are there any min reports from our area that we're looking to go tomorrow, for example? So you want to click on the area of interest, and from there, you'll probably get a whole bunch of boots on the ground observations, maybe a few pictures and lots of great info to work with. So if we were considering going over to the Gulch tomorrow in the tablelands, and I wanted to click this blue drop where my icon is, as Andy showed, it's going to give us a bunch of information which we can scroll through, quick reports, and some photos. And we can't stress enough how valuable these photos are. We can get so much information, and our forecasters are really attuned to picking up on cues in these photos. So yeah, no pressure here on what you're providing. Even a photo and a comment saying we enjoyed our day, that's great. So another great tool.
Or sorry, Peter. I just
Yes.
want to, you're just not in your slideshow mode right now. So I just wanted to give you the heads up. We can still see your slides, but it's not full screen.
Okay, one sec here. Let's see if I can take care of that.
Yeah, just at the top there where it says slideshow.
Yeah, it's funny. Our pictures are right in the way here. Let's see if I
Oh,
can.
okay.
Yeah, that's why.
Oh, then if it's working, then I don't want to fuss around.
No, that's all right. I can figure this out. Better.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, I was getting into the trip planner. And then as Andy described, this tool sort of marries the AITS ratings with your area of interest to the forecast. And it puts it on an easy to read graph, as you can see here. So tomorrow, if we did talk about going over into the tablelands and maybe skiing some bigger lines, first of all, we can see that it's a high, so it's probably not a good idea. But if I were to click on that section of the AITS complex scale there, the black, it's going to pin me right here on this on the trip planner. So clearly not recommended. So this is a great tool to have in the field, and this is a great tool to be using in the morning, getting the idea of some of the terrain that you might want to get into. So from here, we're going to get into step 3, check your gear for function and that you've got it packed. We want to check batteries, transceivers, radios, phones, all that digital stuff's charged. But we also want to do a check of our essential gear like clothing, food, and stuff like that. I also like to do a last minute gear check with my crew or partner. I like to ask one last time in the morning to ensure that everyone has their critical pieces, transceiver, probe, shovel, ... Another part of this check your gear phase, I would say, is doing a transceiver check. And I'd consider this a critical morning ritual and a vital gear check. So this not only makes sure that everyone has their transceiver on, it also checks that it's functioning well. So make that part of the routine. Moving on to step 4, verify conditions. So for me, this step starts as soon as I look at the window in the morning. Is what I see in line with what I expected to see? Is there more or less snow? Has the wind caused drifting in the driveway? On the drive, I'm collecting observations up high if visibility allows. Is the forecast accurate? What's the new snow been doing? Once I get into the field, sorry here. Yeah, once I get into the field, I'm constantly looking for small rolls and small slopes with little consequences to see if I can get the snow to move or crack under my skis or track. This is a great habit to get into, to find sort of weak layers near the surface. I'm going to scroll through and find a separate picture here that seems to have disappeared in my slideshow. There it is. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so this is a great picture that sums up that sentence I just said. We've got Andy working a slope here. It's a small slope with little consequence. And in the background, you can see a bigger slope, same aspect. So by getting some information and pulling it from this slope, we can make some, or help make some decisions of whether we want to go ski the slope in the back there. So yeah, next we want to recognize when conditions are changing. Has it started to snow heavy like in this photo? Is there an increase in winds or a change in wind direction? Has the sun come out? Where's my shades? Things are changing. This photo shows something we call pinwheeling, and it's a pretty obvious indication that there's some big solar input happening on this south-facing slope. So yeah, good indicators there of change. Step 5, or sorry, next we're getting into snowpack tests. So these require a bit more of a professional level of training and experience to perform and interpret accurately. Not to discourage one from getting into the snow, we just need to recognize there's a ton of variability in this process, and it's not a tool to solely base our decisions around. Using these to make a slope assessment without the proper training is a bit like playing with fire. I consider it a nice piece of info to add, but it's not the silver bullet in my decision making for the day. Step 5, good travel habits, good communication. That's what it comes down to basically. We're going to scroll through a number of techniques and tips here to help with this. So let's get into that. Okay, the idea of one at a time. This is the idea of limiting the number of people who will be exposed to an avalanche hazard to just one at any given moment of the day. One at a time when we're crossing a steep slope or avalanche path, one at a time when there's significant overhead hazard above. A situation where we could have one friend buried compared to 4 friends buried. Think about that for a couple minutes, and I find it really drives the point home. This is a wise strategy, and erring on the side of caution here can vastly change the outcome of your day. So yeah, this is one that I'd like for us to think about when we're moving through the backcountry in the future here. Group up in safe spots. Big piece of terrain in this photo. We can see the sledders have removed themselves from danger, basically. You can see they're talking about the slopes. They're on the flats. They're behind that large treed knoll in front of them. They're out of the way. So what are some good spots to regroup in? High points, bumps, ridges, ribs. Off the side where the avalanche would not likely run, maybe tucking into the trees for some lunch, or out of the way on low angle terrain. So places to avoid regrouping would be under overhead hazards like cornices and seracs, in the middle of large avalanche paths, at the base of a bowl or a slope with your snowmobiles clustered together to watch the action, or maybe in rocky areas with a shallow snowpack where the weight of the group might be enough to be a trigger. So regrouping can also be a real pro move on bigger descents. On a run like this, you know, we're obviously attracted to putting in a big long run, but if something goes wrong, how long will it take us to get back to the group? What if we're skiing in the trees and a partner goes in a tree well? How long will it take to get to them? So here we need to balance the pitch length with the need to communicate and respond in a timely fashion. That sort of leads into plan an escape route. Both these slides showed similar things, but on this one, you know, sort of the lines represent, you know, good spots to get out of the path. So before dropping in any line, we need to have a plan, and we need to communicate this with the group. Where will we regroup? Which terrain features might we avoid? What's our escape route if someone does trigger an avalanche? So yeah, as I mentioned, these arrows show both escape routes and potential regroup spots. The feature itself seems, or both these features tend to be sort of U-shaped features with high grounds on the side. So we can get up high, tuck in the trees, and get out of the way. Next piece is use terrain wisely. So let's all take a quick second to digest this photo. There's a lot going on here. So a big take-home sentence here. The number one way we manage our risk while in the mountains is to choose the way we move through terrain. The challenge is to move through terrain both safely and efficiently, but safety should always trump efficiency. So yeah, I'm looking at this photo, and to me, the green lines represent potential ski lines that could deliver enjoyable skiing, while at the same time reducing the likelihood and the consequences of being caught in an avalanche. The orange dashed lines, they represent terrain traps to me, higher consequence areas. A lot of fun, but really dangerous. So a few tips on this note. Utilize high ground wherever possible. Green lines seem to be doing that. Avoid terrain traps. We've identified them in this photo. Maintain a high level of situational awareness to your hazards. Well, these green lines seem to be pretty situationally aware. And above all, listen to your intuition. Speak up if it doesn't feel right. So another tool we can use is reducing the likelihood of causing an avalanche. So another big sentence here that we should consider. The number one way we can reduce the likelihood of triggering an avalanche is to reduce the angle of the slope we ride. So here we can see Andy shredding up a pretty low angle slope, 30 degrees and under, I'd say, but still probably having a lot of fun and without the worry of the what if. So a lot of fun to be had on lower angle terrain, and let's not discredit that. Leads into this slide, reduce the consequences. Let's have a quick look at this photo. What piece of terrain would you say has more consequences? Looking at the right here, it's pretty obvious. It's a much bigger slope. It's much steeper, and it all feeds down into this pond, which represents a massive terrain trap. This avalanche even looks like it punched through the ice, which is going to up the consequence in this situation. When we compare it to the slide on the left, we see a smaller slope, lower angle, it's supported. And really, if there were an incident there, you know, you're probably going to get out of it all right. So this concept of reducing the consequences. So this is especially important in times of increased uncertainty in the snowpack, say a persistent weak layer, or just when we're not in tune with the snowpack that we're in. Here's another big sort of sentence regarding reducing the consequence. If uncertainty is high, terrain consequences should be low. If uncertainty is high, terrain consequence should be low. So the more sorry, so the less confidence we have, the more we should reel it back, basically. Next, we're going to talk about avoiding the problem. This is another strategy that is commonly used to avoid a particular avalanche problem that you're concerned with. So we've been to the forecast, and we know the potential problems we might see for that day. So this works better for some problems than others, but let's have a look at these photos. The photo on the left shows a wind slab. We should have a pretty good idea where we might find these wind slabs from the forecast, and with a keen eye, we can spot them in the field. They're not a lot of fun to ski or snowboard on, so let's just make the decision to avoid them. On the slide on the right, looks like either a wet loose or maybe a wet slab problem. So when the snow starts to heat up enough for this to be a concern, the riding quality is probably no longer worth it. So why would we even go there other than to say work on our tan or something? Forest density. Tight trees in Newfoundland, we've got a lot of them. And we're usually trying to get out of them, but let's recognize and give some value to what they represent, which is safer terrain. So this picture I've got up here shows, a sort of defined line down the middle. That's an avalanche path. And on the right and left, we have some trees and probably a safer zone. So in this terrain, if we're concerned about conditions or they're not what we expected, we can use the trees for our descent and the up track, and we can get ourselves out of the hazard. So these are a few good habits and practices here. And once again, good communication to me is the biggest asset that we can put to use in the field. Moving on to step 6, evaluate slopes. So yeah, the evaluator. Andy talked about getting the forecast, and now that we've got that and we're in the field, we want to start considering specific slopes. So let's pull out this tool. It's great, Pete. Sorry, this is a great tool while we're in the backcountry with our boots on the ground looking at a piece of terrain that we're considering getting into. It's a checklist that considers avalanche conditions and avalanche characteristics. It tallies up a score and plops us somewhere on a graph. So I'm just going to use a small example here of a piece of terrain we have in the Bloemerdens. And in the 8th rating, or sort of the 8th scale, all the terrain we see here would be considered complex. But let's look at the slope in the back. It's clearly different. It's steeper. Doesn't look very well supported. There's no trees. Yeah, it's much different than the foreground, which is lower angle. Yeah, a little more gentle. So, if we were looking at that piece of terrain in the back and we went back and we just looked at the terrain characteristics on this card, slope steepness. Well, I'm going to say it's steeper than 35 degrees, so we can give it a +2. Terrain traps. Yep, it's a pretty big terrain trap in itself. It'd be a bad spot to get caught, no doubt. So I'm going to give it a +1 there. Slope shape, is it convex and unsupported? Well, there's definitely some convexities in it. It's a huge slope, so I'm going to give it a mark there. Forest density, is the slope in the alpine? Is it sparsely treed or an open cut block? Well, there's no trees in this slope, so I'm going to give it a point there. So right off the bat, that piece of terrain in the back with the score from the terrain characteristics alone of 5 is going to put us in the extra caution zone on this card. Once we add into the avalanche conditions, it's surely going to bump it up to a not recommended in today's forecast. So yeah, you can pick this up at the shop online at avalanche.ca or maybe at MEC, but this is a great tool for in the field. And it adds a lot more value to slopes we're looking at and asks a lot of good questions. So I can't stress this one enough. So our last step, step 7, reflect on your day. This is where I find the best learning happens for me. There's 2 parts of this process. The first being the group reflection. This can be discussing with your group on the drive home or after après ski beverages. Can be on the ski out. just talking with your group, asking questions like, where did we make good decisions today? And were there any points at which someone felt uncomfortable with the decision or that we were pushing too hard given the conditions? So this group aspects also gives you the opportunity to see the experience through someone else's view. Maybe they picked up on something that you didn't. Maybe they didn't speak up when they were uncomfortable. So many opportunities in this one. The next part of reflection is personal reflection. So this is asking yourself what parts of the day you feel you managed well and what parts you didn't, what you might do different next time. And yeah, and your sort of overall feel of the day. So a good thing to remember is that the mountains are unforgiving. They're an unforgiving learning environment. We don't often get direct feedback until there is an avalanche. And this can make it difficult to know if it was a good decision to ride that slope just because it did an avalanche. So this is a big reason why we reflect. There's a lot to it, more to it than just coming home and thinking you performed a safe day. So I guarantee you that the pros are doing this all the time. And it's ingrained into them and it's keeping them alive basically. So one final note on reflection is the use of min reports. And these things are so valuable for so many reasons, but by creating a min, we're reflecting on our day. It's going to benefit the riding community. It's going to benefit you in a bunch of ways, and it will benefit the Avalanche forecasters who read our mins daily. And that's especially important here in Newfoundland, where we're sort of a data sparse region. So yeah, I can't stress the value of these mins enough, and we shouldn't hesitate to create them. There's no pressure to show your stuff in these reports. A few pictures gives us a wealth of knowledge. Tick some boxes, it only takes a few minutes. It's a tremendous form of reflection. I also suggest getting the Avalanche Canada app if you haven't already done so. And this is a great way to sort of do these mins on the drive back home. And that's typically where Andy and I talk about mins and get them up online. And, you know, I truly feel that this is sort of reflection at its finest. So yeah, cool. The 7 steps of the daily process. We can use it to up your game, up your safety, and up your value as a partner. Make it the backbone of your backcountry days, and there'll be many more to enjoy. So thanks, guys, for tuning in to the daily process. I hope you got something from that. And as Andy mentioned, you can find a lot of this information on avalanche.ca. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Alex. Have a great winter, guys.
Hey, thanks so much, Peter. Maybe if you want to just keep your camera on, and if Andy wants to turn his camera on as well, and we can take some questions from the audience. Do we have any questions out there? You can either raise your hand using that button or just put your question in the Q&A box. Yeah, well, I'm not seeing any questions yet. Oh, I got one.
A question.
All right, Peter's got one.
So if you guys see us in the field with our colorful snowmobiles and Avalanche Canada logos, what are you going to do? No, just joking here, guys. But yeah, don't be afraid to approach us. That's what we're here for. We're more than psyched to talk to you in the field. And we've had it happen a couple of times this year where random snowmobilers have come up to us, and it's been so valuable, I think, for both parties. So just to stress that point, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys know David Lozon, but he's offering up a beer if he sees you guys. So thanks, David.
We're going to find him.
Yeah. Go look
Sounds
for
like
him.
our next min to win.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions yet. Just a comment from Joyce, who just saying thanks for the great lesson. So yeah, if there's no more questions from the audience, I guess we can move on and give out some prizes. So thanks so much, guys. Yeah, that was a great presentation. Exciting times in Newfoundland, and yeah, it's great to have you guys on the team. And I'm sure you're probably way more excited than I am about what's coming up starting tomorrow.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
All
Hey,
right,
everybody.
oh, there's Nancy with the prizes. All right. Let me
We're
just-
offering up 5 buffs, Avalanche Canada buffs as prizes, and the winners, you guys can email us at producer@avalanche.ca, and the winners are Jesse Byrne, Sean Reed, Steve Wheeler, Josh Robinson, and John French. So again, Jesse Byrne, Sean Reed, Steve Wheeler, Josh Robinson, and John French. So if you email producer@avalanche.ca, we will get you a buff. And thanks for showing up tonight, everybody. And thanks to Andy and Peter. It was a great show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you out there.
Yeah,
Have a
thank you,
great
Nancy.
winter.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Congratulations to the winners. All right, well, I will wrap things up here. Well, thanks so much, guys, as I keep saying. Yeah, for those watching, and as was mentioned, Andy and Peter are sharing their observations on Facebook and Instagram pages. So if you look up Avalanche Canada Newfoundland or AvCan NL on those platforms, you can find their pages and they post regular updates there. They also post their reports to the Mountain Information Network every day. They're out in the field. So if you're not on social media, you can look up their reports on the MIN. We also, of course, hope that you guys start sharing your reports when you're out there in the mountains and let us know what's going on, because it's really helpful, not just for our forecasters, but just for everybody, all your friends and fellow recreationists who are heading out into the backcountry. All right, before we go, we really appreciate you coming out tonight and your interest in avalanche safety. You can support these programs like the webinars and forecasts by donating as little as $10 to Avalanche Canada. Just click on the link in the chat box to go to the page where you can make a donation. Our next webinar is next Thursday, February 24th. We're going to be jumping all the way across the country to northern British Columbia and give a look at conditions updates in the North Rockies and Northwest BC regions. So not sure how many of you are planning trips out there, but if you're interested, tune in. It's at 7 on February 24th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Pre-registration is required, and yeah, so just go to our events page to register. And also want to remind you that all our previous webinars are recorded online. There's lots of great information there if you want to learn more about avalanche safety and backcountry travel. All right, I think that's about it. So let's say thanks again for everybody for coming out and showing an interest in avalanche safety. We hope you enjoy your winter backcountry safe from avalanches. Have a good night.